if you think about an idea and you say, oh, that would be so cool if I could do that, and you get like really excited, and it's usually around your chest area, you get elevated, you feel all this energy coming up, that's usually your heart talking to you.
I had such a great time connecting in person with today's guest. Probably the last time I'm going to be doing one of these in person for a while. I'm Jason Heath. This is Contrabass Conversations, and we are talking today with Christian Fabian, who's the longtime bassist for the Lionel Hampton Big Band. And in fact, I was a clinician for the 2020 Lionel Hampton Jazz Festival. And Christian has been doing that for 25 years. So we talk about that. We talk about his background, attending Berklee, how Brian Bromberg, one of his early mentors, connected him with the Lionel Hampton Big Band, and just about how Lionel Hampton came to fall in love with Moscow, Idaho, and how this festival got started. It's a really interesting story. And Christian, I find this so cool. He is such a lifelong learner. He has been studying for years with Ron Carter and Mike Longo. And Mike recently passed away, but that was after we recorded this interview. So we talk about learning throughout your life, how Christian has maintained his inspiration, the unique challenges and joys of running a group like the Lionel Hampton Band, and so many more topics. I really had a great time chatting with him. And I just want to thank the folks that have supported this podcast over the years. D'Addario Strings, the Bass Violin Shop, Upton Bass, Steve Swan String Bass, Colstein Music, A440 Violin Shop, and Modacity. If you need some strings, if you need a bow, if you need an instrument, if you need a practicing app, any of those things these companies can provide. I'm so thankful to them for supporting the podcast for months and years for some of these companies. And if you can help them through in these challenging times, I know they'd appreciate it. All right, let's get going with this conversation with Christian Fabian.
I meant to ask you at your presentation, I've been to Christian McBride's satellite thing he has. I've been to one up in Harlem. Yeah, when he was in the Harlem Jazz Museum, and he was interviewing Ron Carter. He was interviewing him, then playing, and I noticed that I don't know if that's a podcast, or I think they're available later.
Yeah.
But
yes.
when they actually send it on satellite, they have it on a Sunday and a Saturday, and there are two times, and then you can have them available as a podcast, because I noticed that Josh told me he has been listening to all of them, or a lot of them. So coming back to
great.
the podcast.
Yeah, they're great. Yeah, it's funny because I usually don't get nervous for these anymore, but sometimes with Christian, I was like, I know I'm going to get nervous because he has his own show and he's done everything, and it's what territory can we possibly cover but we had a great chat. It's fine. One of my former students that's a jazzer in Manhattan now. He's knows Christian fairly well. So, but it's good to meet you, man.
Yeah, I can meet you too.
It's been I guess we could set the scene. So we're here. What is today? It's the 28th of February.
February, yeah.
And this is what year for you for this festival?
This is, I think I'm in my 25th year. It's my 25th time returning. And, but then my first year was 1996. Okay. So I think, it's my 25th time I'm here at the Jazz Festival.
Was it called the Lionel Hampton Jazz Festival at that point? Okay.
It was called the Lionel Hampton Jazz Festival. Then at the end of Mr. Dr. Skinner, it was called for a second the Lionel Hampton International Jazz Festival, but then it just went back to the Lionel Hampton Jazz Festival somewhere in the mid-2000s. Yeah.
So I heard you talk. Where were we where this came up? But yesterday, you mentioned to somebody, or maybe it was John Liebman's podcast or his show. You were I think I'm remembering this right, but you talked with him at NAMM, at the NAMM show a couple years ago.
That's right.
And it came up that Brian Bromberg was your intro to the Lionel Hampton Band.
That is correct.
Okay, maybe we can start there. Tell that story. How did Brian connect to you with?
So I met Brian in Los Angeles in 1988. Okay. And it was at a time where I was staying in Los Angeles with a guy who went to Berklee College of Music. He's from Holland. His name is Emil van Ektem. And I just had started my classical studies at the Maastricht Conservatory in Holland, in the Netherlands. It's in the south of Maastricht. And I was studying there. My fellow upright bass player I was taking lessons with, we were taking rides up to Amsterdam every other week, and he was talking in the car, and he said, "Oh, you got to study with Emil. He went to Berklee College of Music, and so you really need to see him." And I'm like, "Okay, good." So I went to Emil. I studied with Emil, and then Emil said, "I can study with him." And then he said, "Well, I'm going to the United States soon. If you want, you can come and study with me in Los Angeles." And Emil was familiar with the concept at Berklee College of Music, so that's why he was so important for me to also get later on the scholarship to go to Berklee College of Music. While I was staying with Emil in Los Angeles, Emil said, "Well, I know this bass player, Brian Bromberg. I really know the drummer, Joel Taylor. But if you want to go and see Brian, then we should go and see some of his concerts." So I went to some of his concerts, and Emil did not have his phone number. And I was talking then to Joel, and I said, "Hey, I'm staying with Emil. I would love to study with Brian Bromberg." And then Joel said, "Oh man, he's a really nice guy. Just go up and ask him." So I went up to Brian Bromberg. He was playing in a hotel. He had this white suit on, which was so 80s, and a white bass and a white suit.
That's very 80s.
Yeah, and then I went up to him, and I took his phone number. And then when we were back home, I called him. I left a message. He didn't return the call till 2 weeks later because he was out of town then. But I had my first bass lesson with Brian Bromberg, and I was staying in Los Angeles for 3 months, and we became friends. And during that time, I had my first bass lesson. I could hardly play. He said, "Play a blues." I couldn't even play a blues. I got lost in the 5th bar. I kind of knew it was going to the subdominant chord in bar number 5, but I didn't know the turnaround. And he was really cool. He took the bass and he taught me through the blues. And from then on, he was staying in the same area where I was staying with Emil, so I always walked over to his house, and then he would take me for his gigs, and we became friends. And in that year, 1988, I got all the recommendation letters to. I asked for my scholarship going to Berklee College of Music, so Brian helped me out. And from then on, we were always staying in touch. And when I then finally went to Berklee College of Music I did one semester in 1990. Then I did not return till spring of 1994. It was in 95. When I had a conversation with, or 96, I had a conversation with Brian, I think in the fall of 95. And then Brian was on the phone. I remember being on the phone with him, and he said, "Man, I have this great idea. You should come out to the Lionel Hampton Jazz Festival. I'm the only bass player, and I have so much work, and you would be perfect." So he reached out to Dr. Skinner, told him about me, and then a couple of weeks later, he called back. He said, "You can go." And so it was a little tricky because he said I could go to the jazz festival, but I didn't have enough money to fly out there. So, matter of fact, I got in touch with Gary Burton, who was back then the vice president or the dean of students at Berklee College of Music. And Gary was familiar with the Lionel Hampton Jazz Festival. He came here once or twice and was a featured artist here at the Lionel Hampton Jazz Festival. So he was in full support. Berklee College of Music got me the airfare, and then I was here at the festival. The festival took care of my room, but I was not paid, actually. It was not a paid position. I was just hanging out here. I remember I did the very first jam session. I was playing till 3 o'clock in the morning at the University Inn, and was playing with Igor Budman, David Sanchez, Joe Lavano, Roy Hargrove. I mean, everyone was sitting in that jam session. We played this really long rhythm change, and we had like 6-7 horn players on that jam session. Matter of fact, I was looking for a picture we took because Roy Hargrove recently passed away last year, and I was looking for the picture we took at that jam session. It was kind of epic. Anyway, then so Brian recommended me to that jazz festival, and then that bass player didn't show up for the Lionel Hampton Big Band the same year. And then I was doing an audition for the Lionel Hampton Big Band. I was coming back then. The festival started. You would come here on a Monday. Then it would start. Ham's Gala was starting on a Tuesday night, and then the shows at the Kiwi Dome were Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Wednesday was always international night. Thursday was another night. There was a house band which Brian Bromberg was part of, and then the festival would be closed out with Lionel's Big Band on the Saturday night. So I did the audition. That's where Doc Skinner came in, and I was doing the audition with Lionel, Kuni Mikami, you will be hearing him tomorrow night. Myself and Doc Skinner were in the room, and I was doing the audition, and we had a podcast yesterday where Lionel called Giant Steps. So I was actually in the room playing Giant Steps with Lionel Hampton, and he was already in his late 80s. And he liked what I was doing. We were also playing a blues, and we were playing Flying Home. And that's about it. I auditioned on 3 songs, and I had to solo, and he was soloing, the piano was soloing. It was a real audition. And then I officially, that was 1996, I was in the big band. And I've never left. I'm coming back here playing with the big band ever since. And since 5-6 years ago, we got the green light from the Lionel Hampton estate to officially restart the big band with Jason Marsalis on the vibraphone, which was chosen by the Lionel Hampton estate as of 2008. So, but he was not always coming to the Lionel Hampton Jazz Festival. Back then, I was a different person in charge, and we were backing up different vibraphone players. So, but for the last couple of years, Jason is coming back, and we currently came out with a live CD. And in this month, we have it in the top 10 in the country with that live CD called Live at Rossmore. So anyway, I pretty much try to put it all in there really quick, but it's a long story. Yeah, so this is my 25th year.
Wow. So I have far too many questions that I have, but I'm curious. So you're here and it's 25 years, but outside of this, what sort of work does the band typically do throughout the year? Is it are you working? What's the schedule like?
Well, we had, after Lionel passed away in 2002, we had some high profile gigs, and we had a major agent in New York. We were doing gigs with Chaka Khan, John Hendricks, what's her name, Holiday. We were so they had an exclusive on the band, and we were doing. There were great gigs, and it kind of died down a little bit in 2007. But we were always coming back to the Lionel Hampton Jazz Festival. But the role of the band changed during that time also. We were not always closing out the festival. We were not always the original members of the band, only with maybe with half the members of the band. There were other guys filling in and girls filling into the band, and we were not always playing Lionel's music. So the role of the band changed a little bit. We were playing music of other arrangers and composers. And it just this year is kind of remarkable because we have all 60 members picked by Lionel Hampton back coming here, and we're going to play an entire, with the exception of one song, because it's also on the new CD, and I can explain that, but we're playing an all-original Lionel Hampton set tomorrow night. On the CD, we have 2 original songs of original band members. Lionel was a big supporter of the guys in the band and always encouraged us to compose and write. So on the CD, there is an original by Lance Bryant, who was the musical director when I joined the band. And then there's also an original of mine, the bass player, which was chosen by Lance to be part of this repertoire where the bass is featured. So it's very rare that you featured in a band, but Lance thought it was appropriate that I get a bass feature in the big band. And after all those years, I'm like, yeah, finally on a bass feature, because a lot of times there wasn't even a bass solo when I was playing. So So there was really a time of, I was doing the math, I think there was a time of 9 years where we really didn't do too much. And then Lionel Hampton got an award at Lincoln Center Jazz in New York, and the Lionel Hampton Estate flew out to New York, and the other co-leader of the band is Cleve Guyton, next to Jason Marsalis. Those are the core kind of co-leaders, we call that, who kind of determine the music, the set list, and a lot of other musical decisions. And so Lionel Hampton got a award at Lincoln Center Jazz. Cleve was invited. I didn't actually know about it, but so the Lionel Hampton Estate came out here and to New York, and Cleve was invited at Lincoln Center Jazz, and they that was around 2014 or 15, and Lionel got an award. That's when the Lionel Hampton Estate is decided and talked to Cleve and said, well, we think it's time for the band to get going and playing again. And I needed then the official okay, which I got shortly after that. What we had to work out when we had the high profile management and after Lionel's passing 2002 to 2007, the Lionel Hampton Estate would write the checks and do the bookkeeping. So it was a little complicated. I'm actually the official bookkeeper, and we have to file all the tax returns, but everything has to be transparent. So my accountant is actually doing the, we have a separate a category, but I file officially. I'm sending out the 1099s with the help of my girlfriend. There's a lot of things behind the scenes going on. We do not have enough money. That's the other thing. We had no budget. We had nothing. Those bandstands you will see on the stage, I mean, we had to kind of, every gig is a challenge a little bit because we have to make sure there's little money left over, for airfare, for paying the accountant. Then we had no bandstands. They kind of disappeared. No one knew where they went to. They were kind of black with a silver lettering on there with Lionel logo on there, and they kind of disappeared. So we had to get new bandstands. Matter of fact, I was borrowing the bandstands from my teacher, Mike Longo, for about 3 years, and we had a poster, and I'm also a member of the Mike Longo Big Band, so I had to tape the posters over there so they look like real bandstands till we had actually the money to buy the bandstands. Anyway, so it's kind of a couple of challenges, but we made it, and we made it with the approval of the Lionel Hampton Estate, which was huge for us. And now we're filing our taxes, and the co-leaders, including the Lionel Hampton Estate, everyone sees the numbers, and there's a spreadsheet, and everything is done really official, unofficially. Or we got the official okay unofficially, or we got the unofficial okay and doing everything officially. I don't know, but I think that's how I call it. So we made it, and it's we have a lot of requests, and we just came back to play Birdland in New York City, which is like the jazz corner of the world. First time after 19 years, we have been back, and we played from Tuesday through Saturday, and every first set in the beginning of the week, obviously, a lot of people, it's a little slower than the weekend, but we packed the first set every night, starting on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then by Wednesday, the second set was building up, and we had like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, we had really a strong run, and they asked us to come back. So that was a huge success for us.
Yeah, well,
go ahead with the other.
The Birdland, I mean, man. And all that accounting, all that sort of stuff, like, you think back to, like, being at Berklee or, like, starting out here, like, did you ever imagine you'd be doing all of that? All that stuff behind the scenes, the unglamorous work to like, actually make it happen, the necessary work, right?
I wish I would have learned that. I just, getting my hands onto QuickBooks and Quicken and all the other things, because it's a lot of paperwork. The thing is really what happened in 2000, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when we got the official okay. You would think people would be flocking over the Lionel Hampton Big Band. Most agents, and I talked to 3 of them, major agents in New York City, they don't want to deal with the big band.
It's just too complicated.
They don't like. It's like, who's hiring a big band these days? On the other hand, I saw a lot of the members of the Lionel Hampton Big Band were actually playing back then with the Count Basie Big Band, and a lot of guys play with the Duke Ellington Big Band. These are all guys you will see tomorrow, mostly in the horn section, who really learned the ropes with Lionel Hampton. When they came out of college, Lionel Hampton took them on the road. And I saw these other big bands playing. I thought, if they play, we can play too, because I know the Hampton Big Band is different. It's very hard swinging, where everything is strongly rooted in the blues, although we don't play the blues all the time, but there's an attitude of the blues element in the band. And there you will meet a trumpet player, John Mark McGowan. We did a couple of years ago a documentary at the Louis Armstrong Museum where we're honoring Louis Armstrong, because Louis Armstrong was Lionel Hampton's mentor and Lionel Hampton was our mentor. So we wanted to have, in the tradition, we went to the Louis Armstrong Museum, we walked through the house and we did interviews. And that's when John Mark McGowan said, it's important for Lionel's music to keep on going, because there's no other big band. I'm not saying we're the best big band in the world, but I can say there's no other big band sounding like the Lionel Hampton Big Band. So these facts and the legacy of Lionel Hampton. And another experience I had years ago, I called into Seattle. We always traditionally played Idaho, and then we went to Seattle and played a major jazz club. So a couple of years ago, I thought, oh great, we got the band running again, so we can go and play back in Seattle. I called Seattle, and there was this young girl picking up the phone who was the booker for the club. And I said, yeah, we would like to return with the Lionel Hampton Big Band. And she said, Lionel who? So that was the sign for me. It's like, I gonna bend over backwards and I do everything possible that the next generation will know. And we are in a critical point right now where there's another experience I was mentioning on the podcast yesterday, where I was in an elevator. I was having my bass and I said, well, just I said to the guy, it's like, who you playing with? I said, well, I'm playing with Lionel Hampton Big Band. It's like, I never heard of that. And I said, well, you ever heard of Duke Ellington? He said, of course. What about the Count Basie Big Band? Of course. I'm like, so that was a big of course, but when I mentioned the name Lionel Hampton, that was not of course. And Lionel Hampton, as we said yesterday, and I said in my workshop today, he's groundbreaking. He broke down the racial barriers in the music by being member of the first integrated band in 1936 with Benny Goodman. It was the famous Benny Goodman Quartet with Teddy Wilson, Lionel Hampton, Benny Goodman, and G. Cooper, who really broke down the racial barrier. And Lionel said in a quote he thought that was a major event for the Negroes. That's his quote, because it broke down the racial barrier and set the standard and the bar really high for the sports. He thought that event was groundbreaking, that also in the sports the racial barriers was broken down. That was a tough time back then. I have a letter where we're quoting Lionel Hampton, the original quote. But so as important as Duke Ellington and Count Basie is, then 1940 Lionel Hampton started his band. Lionel Hampton always had that mindset. He looked at a musician with his heart, not with his eyes. He was always in his big band. There were all races and all different nationalities. I'm from Germany. I was born in Sweden, although I have German parents, so I consider myself German. Then Kuni Mikami is Japanese. So then we had Igor Budman is Russian. I mean, there were always. He always looked for great players, and it was beyond that. So all of these things, you talk about accounting, yeah. Having that history in a band, I'm like, what the heck? I'm going to learn this accounting stuff. It's important anyway, so might as well sit down there till we do have an agent who will do that all for us, But at this point, we're kind of borderline. We another couple of high-profile gigs, and I think we really made it. And I think Birdland was a huge success for us. By the way, we do have the entire performance. The entire Wednesday night is on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, and then also the entire set at the Blue Note, and then some other performance we did. We have like over 145 songs on our YouTube channel. Over the last 5 years, we've been posting them. Just for one, letting people know we are playing again. Number two, as a document that we are up and running again. It's really important to see that.
Yeah, I was digging through some of that before we were
great.
chatting, and it's incredible. And it's like man, let's say people listen from all over the place. So like, let's say someone's never been to Birdland. Like, what's that experience like from maybe from the bandstand or just the whole bird? Like I mean, it's like playing Carnegie Hall, right? Isn't it kind of like that? I think of it in that category.
Yeah, it's amazing. I was one of the guys who played there 19 years earlier with Lionel, and I had played there with a few other acts in between. And I mean, it was an amazing experience. I mean, it was really, all the guys were like, some of them play there on a more regular basis, again, the horn players with other big bands. But to me, it was just an amazing experience. I do have to say about the Birdland gig, is like all the guys like, oh yeah, we are back at Birdland. But I said to the guys, it's like, it has to be great every night, because I'm not really satisfied till I know that we're getting either, the approval and the word that we will be hired back. That was a big thing for me. So I was kind of like, I had a great time and I was really good, but it was really interesting that the owner was on a jazz cruise, but he came back the last night. So to me, it was like, well, I wanted to hear the owner of Birdland telling me, it's like, yeah, you guys, you sound great, it's like, so he basically said, we're going to be back there and we're going to pick a better month for you in terms of the weather. We were playing there kind of like in the beginning of February. It was pretty cold. So that was a big, to me, it's like, yes, great. And then to me, being partially responsible for the gigs, like I want to really, you don't play there like 3 times a year, so they're going to have you back within a distance of a year or more. So, but I think, I'm looking forward to be back there. And it was an amazing experience and really a great turnout. I mean, I was so happy to see the turnout. Especially the first set on the YouTube channel, you will see the audience feedback on a Wednesday night. It's just unbelievable. The club was just full with people. It was really amazing. Yeah.
So here we are, Moscow, Idaho.
Yeah.
I just got it. So like, I think people who might not, and I've learned a lot about the history of this festival ever since Josh Skinner invited me. It's fascinating. But I think a question that a lot of people would ask is like, how the heck did Lionel Hampton fall in love with this place and this get built up? Like, how did Lionel end up spending so much time in Moscow, Idaho?
Yeah, we covered it yesterday in the podcast, and hopefully Josh will make that available to you. As far as I heard, they wanted to bring it out on Monday. I was hoping they might bring it off by before we play. But I don't know. It's a lot of work, as you said. Someone has to edit everything. But we have it documented, and Dr. Skinner is really the guy who started all of this. And in the 80s, so the first festival started in, I think, 1967 or 68. 1967, it started. And then someone else was taking over in 1968. Dr. Skinner was a student in that time. And he got involved with the festival in 1971 till I think 1976 or 7, and he was just a student moving music stands, setting up the stage and everything. And then I think in 1977 or 78, someone said, "Could you just do it for 1 year?" And he ended up doing it over 30 years. So it was then it grew under his leadership. And I think early 80s he had Ella Fitzgerald here. And that was a big thing. And then also in the 80s, I think 1 year he had Sarah Vaughan and Lionel Hampton here. And the kids were just going crazy. And that's when Doc is a special person. He has a lot of love for a lot of people. And he is really unconditional in that he has no judgments of any sort. So he is like this tall, big, embracing person. And I think what we figured out on the podcast yesterday, that this Lionel really resonated to that love vibration coming from Dog, and it kind of radiated out, and they became friends. And I think it radiated out throughout everyone coming to the festival. It was just something they were able to create something here which people felt was different, and I think it really radiated out of this friendship. And I think that that connection with Doc and Lionel, I do know from talks with Doc that they always talked over who they would have at the festival. I think that sounding board between Doc and Lionel and making these decisions, they were bringing in artists who were in that vibration and represented what Lionel represented in the music. You know, he had this tremendous love for the music. He had the tremendous love for education, you know, for a love for the students. So I think that that's kind of all enticed in that, which really made this festival really boom in the 90s. I mean, it was like they had 18,000 students come here. I mean, it was huge. So I think, you know, that relationship we figured out yesterday, you know, was kind of the anchor. Everything was kind of how you call that? It was kind of radiating out of that relationship.
Yeah, it's funny, like you mentioned 18,000 people at one time here. I think
students.
Moscow. Yeah, students. Right, and it's incredible. Like, it's been interesting, like, me, you know, it's my first time in this part of the state. Certainly, Moscow, I think, has 30,000 people or something like that. So to bring in 18,000 people, that's like over half the size of this town. And it's just so interesting that the people I've met the last couple of days, all sorts of people from British Columbia, people coming down from Canada, coming out from Seattle, people coming out from Eastern Oregon. And just it's incredible, like all, and you're in New York City, right?
New York City, yes.
Okay, so I live in San Francisco.
Yeah.
So, and I get I fly to Seattle, and then I'm about to get on the plane and say, oh, we changed your seat because we have to rebalance the weight. And I said, like, what kind of a plane are we flying here? You know, we flew into this tiny airport here, and it's so interesting. And you've been doing it for so long. Coming here, it's like I don't know, like living in a place. Like, I feel like San Francisco is fast paced, and that ain't nothing compared to New York City, you know? And you spent so much time here now. Like, what does it feel like coming back here? I mean, I know you're so comfortable here, but even just like the people, the energy, it's just different here. I feel like I just like I got off the plane and everybody's friendly.
Yeah.
Nobody's honking at me. Yeah. You know, I don't know what's true. Yeah, like just that vibe of this place.
I think the you know, having the campus available and having that peaceful, as you described, surrounding makes the festival possible. Now, the festival itself, as you can see at the schedule, is pretty high paced. I mean, there's so much going on, and you got to be really on your toes to make it in time to all those different events. And so I do think that the festival itself always had this like high pace to it, you know, where you just get a lot of done in a day, and there's a lot of going on. You got to make sure you don't miss anything, and you want to meet someone over there. You want to, you know, I'm connected to a lot of the teachers here, and I want to, you know, I do a lot of the workshops I do throughout the year has come through the fact that teachers come to see my workshop here, and they're like, man, it's so great. Can we have you come out to our school and work in our program? And that all has built over the years. So, and sometimes I want to see the students. I mean, it's tremendous. Matter of fact, don't want to give it away, but there's one teacher here whose trio is performing a Oscar Peterson number either tonight or tomorrow, and they are amazing. I mean, they just sound like the Oscar Peterson trio with Ray Brown and Ed Thigpen. I mean, it's smoking. And there's kids, you know, I mean, you know, they're like 16, 17 years old, you know, and it's just unbelievable. So, the inspiration is a big part of that, and accessibility to the artist, I think, which makes it different. It's a very friendly environment, like you said, and I think the musicians coming here, it resonates with them, and everyone, you know, you walk from one thing to the other, everyone can approach you. I think what's different about this festival has been that the artist is always who comes here is approachable. You know, they walk through the campus, over the campus, or going to the evening concerts, you know, they just sometimes, I mean, I'm always walking around through the Kibbe Dome. I'm at the gift shop and I'm walking around. I'm always meeting people. I mean, it's also the choice of the artist. I mean, there's some high-profile artists I know over the years, they just stayed in their trailer, you know, and they but it's a choice. If you resonate with that energy, you want to go and meet these people. You're like, oh, this is different. You're going to go to the different events and you're going to say hi. You're going to meet some students. You're going to sign some programs and things like that. This has been happening here every year. Yeah, I mean, coming back to your question, it is different. And I picked up on it right away. Absolutely. And that's something I'm always looking forward. I have made lifelong friends here over the last 25 years. And I'm sure with the progression of the festival and the band returning, there will be more friendships to be made. But it's really, it's unique in that sense, that everyone is very approachable.
Well, I've picked up on that too. Even just like the couple workshops I've done since I've been here, it's like this big crowd of people chatting, and just as I've been walking around or before the concert last night, just like what you're describing, I totally see that. And how cool, for everybody, for these students, because I'm struggling to think of an event like this that I've been at, and I've lived in some big cities, Chicago and the West Coast now. And then these teachers, especially if they come back year after year, how cool to see you and to see some other people that are involved for a long time, and then obviously getting new faces in here. And I mean, this is the sort of thing that would totally charge up my batteries if I was a teacher. You have all the frustrations of just like daily life and the struggles. There's a lot. It's a beautiful job, but it's a tough job. But like to come here and like see all this artistry and connect with people, and then how cool that you get to have these long-term relationships with these people. And then go and work with people in the schools. You probably fly out that's a long flight from New York to out here. I guess you're used to it at this point, though.
Yeah, I know. I've been, and most of it goes through Seattle. I mean, I love Seattle, and I have a lot of friends in Seattle, and there's a lot of musicians I met here. Matter of fact, some of the adjudicators, we have a band together, and they're here adjudicating Edward Littlefield, Ruel Lubac, and they're Seattle-based, and Ed Littlefield is an alumni of the U of I here at the program. And I mean, you become friends, you start bands, or you go into someone's music program. And you're right about the inspiration. I think it's very good that the festival went back to a competitive status, because the competitive in a motivating way. It's very important for these music teachers who teach all year round, and maybe some of them I know go to other festivals. But you want to know where you stand with your band. It's not so much that you want to be the best, you want to win all the time, but you want to have a measurement of where you at and how you can improve. And I'm still going to workshops. I still have 2 teachers. I don't know if I told you, but I'm studying with Ron Carter for over 5 years on a weekly basis, and I'm studying with a great piano player, Mike Longo, who used to be Dizzy Gillespie's musical director for many years. And it's important to have a measurement, I talked to Ron Carter about being non-competitive, and he said that's basically impossible, because the thing with Ron Carter is, talking about bass players, he said, you're even competing with yourself. If you play one night in a club and you're not doing well and you want to do better the next night, you're competing with yourself. You're comparing yourself as, how did I do tonight and what can I do better tomorrow? It's kind of an internal competition with yourself. You can call it something else, but it's not like, hey, it's not like you don't care. It's like, I mess up. It's like, well, okay, well, I'll mess up tomorrow again. No, you don't do that. You want to be, personally, you want to find justice to the music. Ron always says the music is the boss. So you want to be like, how can I do better? How can I do more justice to the music? How can I play this music the best possible way? And for Ron, it's always, what choice of notes represents this? How can I do better? How can I find better notes for this piece of music, for the band and the music, to make this better? He's consistently always on this journey where he wants to do everything better than did he the night before. Matter of fact, when you're a student with Ron, and Ron is playing the blue note, he's playing the Iridium, he's playing Birdland, or he's playing Smoke, or he's playing Mesereau, wherever he plays for a week, once you study with Ron Carter, he wants you to come the first night, and he wants you to come the last night. And the whole purpose is that he wants you to observe how the music developed, how the music evolved from the first night to the last night. And then in the beginning, when you first study with him, he will talk to you about in the lessons, like, what did you notice? How is that first night different from the last night? And ultimately, he always chooses the first set and the second set, and he might make a few changes throughout the week, but the first set is always the same first set, and the second set is always the same second set. So he will not repeat the first set with the second set the same night. So it's a lot to be learned on. In the beginning, this was all new to me. It's like I never heard anyone talk about it, and it was kind of like mind-boggling. I was, wow, man. It's like there's so much to it. Yeah, there's so much to it, and so it's good to have that standard. Getting some input and being rated. How did you do, and have that. It's good for the student. It's good for the teacher, and I think it's a very natural way of evolving. It's not so much that you're inspired by other musicians, but then you find something within yourself and you want to make that the best possible me. It's like, I have this vision. How can I make this come out? How can I represent it? How can I make something and play something where I feel comfortable with, but this is the best possible me I can represent, or the music can, this is the best me presenting the music in the best possible way. So it is very competitive. There could be a different word for it, but it's being competitive in a good way.
I love that thought of being competitive with yourself. I was thinking about these, even I'd done the same workshop a few times here, and I remember talking to my dad about this. When he would do something, had a similar talk that he would do for years and years, but he'd always be trying to make it better. What could I? And I got to ask, like, I love that studying with Ron. And I got a couple of questions about that, but I love that the concept of going like the first night and then going the last night, and so I got to ask, like, is there any? I'm sure the music does develop. Are there any commonalities in how it develops? Like, do the interaction between the musicians, or like taking more chances, or like in general, like how does that develop? Or maybe even on your own gigs, like when you do a week like that.
Yeah, I think that there are two aspects of this. There's the general aspect and there's Ron's aspect. I can tell you what he's after with his bands. The general aspect. I mean, for the Lionel Hampton Big Band, it was very, very cool. I'm working also on my bass sound at the moment, and Ron suggested I would work with his gear and his sound guy throughout the entire Birdland week, just to have that experience. And I was very open-minded, and that was one thing. So there was a couple of working with the big band at Birdland. I was working every night. The guys didn't even notice, except for the drummer, that there was something different. Most of the guys didn't know till the last night. At the last night, I officially thanked Ron Carter and the sound guy for helping me throughout the week. But I don't think the guys in the band really knew what was going on. But there was something which was just personal for me. In the band, the development, I talked to Lance in length, Lance Bryant, who's the musical director, and I shared with him Ron's vision. And so Lance and I were really communicating how we were doing, and we made a few changes in terms of song order on the third night. And it was really, really great that we did that. And we were both really we were really open about talking about it and what you think about this and that. And we made this change. Then developing the music, with the big band, musically speaking, I mean, the band was really on fire from day number one. And I think the guys got more and more comfortable, playing, you really want to pick a great set and then play it as good as you can. And once by the third night, on Thursday night, we made a little change. And then from Thursday, Friday, Saturday, it was just like, every night was a great night, but you could feel the guys just getting more and more into it. That's what happens when you play every night. In terms of Ron Carter, it's a whole kind of different ballgame, because Ron vision is the bassist is in charge of the band. So he will challenge the soloist and he will challenge the band with a different set of chord changes, alternate changes. And he hears all this, he expecting from his rhythm section to be on its toes all the time, because although they play the same songs, and that's something he learned from Miles Davis, he's really big on developing the music. He says sometimes, when he sees these younger musicians, and it's like, yeah, we want to sound like Miles Smiles, and we want to sound like that. He's like, that the musicians forget. He said, Miles Davis traditionally had a very small library. They would play the same songs night after night over and over again. But it enabled them to open every possible door and opportunity to walk into. They really played like Autumn Leaves or whatever, night after night after night, and they were trying different things till they get Autumn Leaves to a way where we hear it on the recording. But it was not like that magic moment that they went on stage and just say, hey, this is, no, it developed over weeks, over months, over a long time. And so that's what he's doing with his big band and the trio and the quartet and his nonette, where he's playing with 4 cello players. He has like 4 or 5 and duets, so he has 4 or 5 different concepts of bands he is working with. So he has that same demand on these bands. So he will challenge the trios, and the most significant change I have seen with Ron is in his nonette. There's this other bass player, Bootsy is his nickname. Forgot his full name at the moment, but he lives around the corner of Ron. And I went to the first night and I just heard the 4 cellos and the rhythm section. I went back to the second to last night, and he basically had a bass duets in every other song, which means he would do a solo, Bootsy would do a solo, and then they would change 8, they would change 4s, and I said to Ron on my next lesson, I said, wow, I never expected that you would open up like that. And he's like, well, it just felt like doing it, and I wanted that element in the music. So he might sometimes get some totally new ideas throughout the week and just make his musicians do that, and then you come back, and it was amazing how he put that element within the existing structure. They would just open up for solos, and it was really beautiful to hear Ron change 4s and 8s and choruses with his bass player in his band. Yeah. I mean, it's like, who does that?
Yeah, I know. Well, just the level, the magnitude of the work that he's doing, like talk about a work ethic.
Yeah,
and I mean, at any age,
yeah,
that is a busy schedule.
It's 82.
You're right. Yeah, right. And I love like if you're ever feeling like you're, he makes me feel real lazy real quick when I look at. Didn't Ron write? Did I read that somewhere? Did Ron write the liner notes for something of yours?
Yeah.
Yeah, how
is a bass duet. So that's an interesting story. So I came to a point. So in a nutshell, I did a couple of lessons. It didn't go too well in the beginning. It's a long story. It's pretty funny, but I'll tell it maybe another time. But it was pretty clear to me after 15, 20 lessons, I'm like, I had this choice, and I realized money was an issue doing a lesson every week. And it was really, since I'm also studying with Mike, I was kind of like really with the back against the wall. But I said to myself, I have this choice. I can, stick with this guy for as long as I can and open up and ask him anything which comes to my mind, or I just can stop, and then my legacy will be, I had a couple of lessons with Ron Carter, and that would be it. But I was very aware of the fact that if I want the true mentorship, I have to keep going, studying with him, which led to the thing that I always ask him advice when I feel I have to ask him. So it was funny, I was on this bass lesson, and then I said, it's like, I'm not there next Saturday. It's like, where are you going? I said, I'm going down to Florida. What you doing? I said, I'm recording a bass duet. And he was like, a bass duet? And he's like, do you have a concept? I say, no, not really. It's like, well, Mr. Fabian, you do have to have a concept when you go into the studio. He walked me to the kitchen. He pulled out some music. And he said, he talked about, you got to have ideas, you got to have a form, you cannot just go and jam. He's not a big jam guy. I mean, he does it, but the thing is with a concept behind it. And so then I opened up, I said, well, I'm going to do a bass duet. His name is David Pastorius. He's the nephew of Jaco Pastorius, and we're doing a CD. And so he encouraged me to really sit down. And I remember I had, like a couple of nights before I went down to Florida, I sat down and I wrote down some song forms and wrote down some ideas, and then in the studio we were developing some ideas, and then even David's ideas when I was at his house in Florida before we went to the studio. I wrote down the chord changes. I tried to find some structure, a bridge or something, and then we had another session, and so we ended up with a CD. And then because he gave us advice, or gave me advice, I actually brought David over to one lesson with Ron. He was in New York. He lives in Florida. And I said, David, let's go and meet Ron Carter. And then I actually scheduled a regular lesson, and we just used the lesson for Ron and David to get to know each other. And that was cool. I thought it was important for us as a duo that he gets to know the guy who's giving me advice, So, and it was a great experience. He was pretty excited about that. And so after we had a finished CD, I thought, well, he kind of gave a couple of hints and advice and things for me to say to do. It would make sense for him to write the liner notes. And I was like, it's 2 bass guitars. I wasn't really sure if that was his type of music. And I said, Ron, and the funny thing is, I said, could you give us a quote? So I gave him the recording, and then he was busy. He was traveling, and it's like, Mr. Carter, what's about the quote? Yeah, I'm on it. You will get it, And then a week later, Mr. Carter, well, I wanted to get the CD ready for the NAMM show because we're also showcasing our instruments built by the same guy. And then again, Mr. Carter, what about the liner notes, or what about the quote? I always asked for the quote. Yeah, I'm on it. I get it. And then I thought he would say, hey, whatever. Nice CD, and then he ended up sending me this Word document, and he was doing a couple of sentences to each song. Wow. I'm like, oh wow, and we already had the CD laid out and everything, and I'm not going to turn down his liner notes. So I went to the graphic designer and said, well, we have this, half a page of thoughts about each song. Can we put it on the CD? And he's like, well, I can make the font a little slower, so we kind of squished it on there. But no, you can really read it really well. But that was kind of interesting. But that was a long story. So I did another bass duet, which is going to come out with 2 upright basses. I'm going to have it come out. It's Rodney Jordan, the bass player for Marcus Roberts Trio. And we did something with 2 upright basses. So I used the same concept, an idea. The thing about Rodney is he's so open-minded. We actually did a couple of things. We played some songs, but then we also did some free music and some, he's also, we were thinking about different tunings. We did the whole CD on 432, and then we did some hymns by Hildegard von Bingen. We did some polyphonic music, and I mean we did 2 4-hour recording sessions, and we ended up with enough material for 2 CDs. So that's going to be interesting. But that's something which will be released this spring. But anyway, that's a whole different story. But Ron's concept or idea to really prepare a recording session, I took the bass duet with David. I took the same mindset into the recording session with Rodney. Yeah, so that's what we're talking about too. So I ask him everything coming to my mind, and he said a few times, he said, Mr. Fabian, what I appreciate about you as a student is like, you ask me any questions. I'm like, okay, well, thank you. It's not always easy, but it's challenging at times, but it's a great mentorship.
Well, and you've been studying with him for like 5 years?
Yeah, 5 years. I think it started in 2015.
And remind me the name of who you were studying also at the same time with?
Mike Longo.
Okay, so and you started about the same time?
No, Mike. I'm starting with Mike since the early 2000s. Actually, I'm with him for over 15 years.
Well, so it would some people might find it interesting, somewhere where you're at in your career, which I think is super cool, and it kind of goes to that like continual learning and like Ron talking about trying to always make things better. But like I'm guessing a lot of people who are out of school at this point aren't probably studying regularly with somebody like you are. Like what made you feel that I think it's probably obvious why it's beneficial, but like I also think probably most people aren't doing that outside of school. I mean, at least most people I talk to. What inspired you to just keep going with lessons and then maybe like approach Ron? Because, you know, like you're saying, it's a financial investment, it's a time investment, and you're a busy individual anyway, so you're carving out that precious time to do that.
Well, there's a couple of reasons. Number one, and then you know, I did have some kind of learning difficulties in school. I was just slow. I was just always a slow learner, and I just thought, you know, it's good for me to keep going, you know, because I know it takes me a while to learn something, you know. And then, obviously, I mean, it's just been proven that maybe I'm not that slow, but maybe that's just my feeling about myself. I'm probably faster than I think I am. The other thing is, I do really want to learn how to do bebop, improvising like Charlie Parker, and studying with Mike. I realized because he's teaching this rhythm concept called universal rhythm, something he learned from Dizzy Gillespie. He has a DVD series out called The Rhythmic Nature of Jazz, where he, in 4 DVDs, kind of put in everything he learned from Dizzy Gillespie. And I'm actually on DVD number 3 and 4. He is on this whole journey of delving into what made Dizzy play the way he's playing. So that's one of the motivations. I'm like, even Mike is still like practicing and always finding something new. And you come to one of his lessons, like, man, I have to show you this. I found this new thing. He has these, he called them activators. He has these rhythms and little bits of melodies, which propels you into a different space. He strongly believes that if you play a rhythm in a different way, and he has some stories of what happened to him when he was with Dizzy, that it puts you in a different mindset. You know, he's trying to unlock and getting into this place Dizzy was in, and it's the rhythm which gets you there. And well, he's just a great inspiration. And I didn't feel, when I first joined the Lionel Hampton Big Band, the reason I started studying with Mike, I didn't feel my rhythm was as solid. Although I'm listening back to some of the stuff I was doing in the past, I'm like, man, that sounded pretty good back then. But there was the first trumpet player who passed away when I first joined the Lionel Hampton Big Band. He told me there was a couple of years where he said, man, you're rushing. You're always rushing. You know, I'm like, wow. You know, and then at the same time I met Mike, and he taught me that drum concept he learned from. So everyone who's studying with Mike learns the conga drum, and you learn this African rhythm, and it's like there's a foundation and there's like layers of layers you can build on throughout your lessons, and he teaches you and walks you through all the different levels, and that really had a huge impact on my playing. So that's one of the reasons I'm keep studying with Mike. And then it's actually, you know, Mike and Ron, we were playing always on Mike's lesson, and then Mike complained about my bass lines. He said, you know, because he played with Paul Chambers and you know, Sam Jones and I forgot his.
Just that's a good lineup.
Yeah, that's a good lineup. So he complained about my bass line in the lesson. It's like, man, you're always breaking your melodic flow. It's like, what is he talking about? It's like, well, you started this idea, and then suddenly you break your melodic flow, and that messes up my solo because I'm listening to you. I'm like, whoa. You know, I'm like, he's listening to every note I'm playing as a bass player. So then after, I worked on it and everything, and then the idea, because Mike and Ron, they actually live really close to each other too, but then you know, Mike said, it might be a good idea for you to study with Ron Carter, you know. And then it kind of bothered me, you know, and then that we would play a song in our lesson and he would stop it, and then and he said, well, you know, it's all about, he started with Oscar Peterson, and it's all about, when he started with Oscar Peterson, it's not so much about practicing, but it's about, Oscar Peterson called it removing weaknesses. So it's like you keep playing and studying, but it's removing weaknesses. And you got to be open to your own playing and got to be, what is my strong side, what is my weak side. So when Mike always said that, it's like it's about removing weaknesses, I'm like, well, maybe I should take a closer look at my melodic bass lines and what I'm doing there really, and how to choose the right notes for a bass line. It's like, so I went and started studying with Ron. And I didn't really know him too well, so I had to go a couple of gigs, had to introduce myself. I mentioned Mike's name, and then it's like this whole procedure you go through where you got to send him an email, and he might respond, he might not respond. You got to send him an email back. I mean, he's a busy guy. And the other thing is what happens to me as a teacher. I noticed I'm better in my game teaching and being taught. I like being in that spiral. I like receiving information and giving information. I like that constant reflection on where I am and explaining something to a student and maybe explaining something different. It just makes me a better musician. It makes me a better person. It makes me a better communicator. I noticed when I moved to New York from Boston, I was studying with Charlie Barnacos, who was kind of like Michael Brecker, Danilo Paris, Mike Stern. I mean, he's kind of like a Jerry Bergonzi. He's like this jazz nerd teacher.
Yeah.
He's like very specific. And I was studying with him for 2 years. When I moved to New York, I was really struggling. It was hard for me to pay my rent and everything. I stopped taking lessons and I stopped teaching, and for about 1.5 years. And I tell you that I was never more unhappy than in that time. I realized when I started teaching lessons with Mike, when I took lessons with Mike again, and then I picked up my students, I was just in a better place. I was more happy. I felt I was closer to the music. I was more involved in the process of just what is this all about, what we're doing? How can I get better, So that I'm just a happier person being in that place. So that's why I decided to keep studying and teaching at the same time, while I have a career where I'm bringing out CDs and composing music and everything. It's just, for me, that's all one thing.
Well, you're my favorite kind of podcast guest, because we could talk for like 10 more I have like a mentally bookmarked like 25 topics easily that we can get to. I don't know if you know Pablo Aslan at all. He's a tango bassist. He's in New York City too, but I
would love to meet him.
Oh, he's great. I've had him on the podcast a few times. He's like, I've talked to lots of people. He's my perfect podcast because he's super interesting, like you are, and introspective and like, so let's, if you're okay with it, let's have this be the first of many, because I've actually had people on the show. I think the record holder is 7 times. This is
wow.
bassist named Danny Zeman. He's actually pretty young too, but he just keeps on doing interesting. So when you got two albums coming out, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Anything that new is coming up, and because there's so much. I love to talk about composition, deep dive into Lionel. You talk about bass tone. That's super interesting. Yeah. We could talk more about Mike. But maybe we could wrap up, because I know you have a busy.
Yeah.
Let's. I usually, and you're chatting with all these parents and young people here now. You've been doing that for 25 years now.
Yeah.
But and probably a lot of people come up to you and they're 16 or 17 and they're interested in doing this and they're trying to figure out what to do next. And like maybe you could turn that around and like think about yourself at that age. Like if you could go back and talk to like when you were how old were you when you ended up at Berklee?
Well, I was in my early 20s.
Okay, so like then, or maybe slightly before then, but if you could go give young Christian some advice, what would you tell like 18-year-old Christian, 21-year-old Christian?
Well, can I tell you what I usually say on the workshops?
Please, yeah, of course.
Well, it's to me, it's following your heart. There's a native saying in this country that means, which I heard years ago, and I don't know what tribe it's coming from, but that the roadmap of your life is engraved in your heart. So then I usually, on a workshop, I ask the young people, how do you know your heart is talking to you? And they give all kinds of answers. And then usually my answer is, if you think about an idea and you say, oh, that would be so cool if I could do that, and you get like really excited, and it's usually around your chest area, you get elevated, you feel all this energy coming up, that's usually your heart talking to you. And you know that, because what flabbergasts me about that saying is the roadmap of your life is engraved in your heart. That means it's already there. Yeah. So how do we know, how do we get there? To me, it's like, it's secret. How do we find the road which is already engraved in our heart? So we have to learn how does our heart speaks to us. And that's usually through excitement, where we like thinking about an idea and it's like, oh, that would be so cool. I could study with Ron Carter. That would be amazing. And then usually the mind comes in and it's like, dude, you have no enough money. How are you going to do that? You're way too busy. How are you going to do that? You cannot even find 20 minutes to practice. That's our mind talking to us. Yeah. It's all negatives. They're coming in, boom, So when I talk in my workshops about that, it's like, pay attention to the things which makes you internally excited and protect that from others and from yourself. It's like, this is most likely what you should do. So that's what I usually talk about, because it's not being talked about in middle school or high school, colleges, and after college. There's so many things I had to figure out after college. But to me, what I did notice, I was in high school, I always looked out the window and I was dreaming. And I was like, I could not imagine life after high school. I was like, what am I going to do? But I was kind of like, boy, that would be cool if I could do that. I had that thing going, So I had that already. I had always ideas, but I would have never believed that they could become true. So then when I started teaching, I heard that native saying. I'm like, that's what happened when I was younger. I had this thing. I was in this different world. And I think that's why I wouldn't say I was a slow learner, but I had difficulties in school and I had a lot of tutors and everything. But I think I was in this la-la land a little bit. But to me, it was real, But back then I thought it was just ideas, but that it could be actually become something real, had to be proven many, many, many years later. But I think that dreaming aspect of the internal excitement and the possibility that I'm like, wow, it would be cool if I could do music for the rest of my life. How that would actually turn out and pan out, I didn't know. But it was just this idea. I always had teachers who would encourage. I always had teachers who would inspire me. Even my first, but my first bass teachers, I always liked to go to his lessons. And then I met the guy in Holland, and I always liked to go to his lessons. And they were upbeat, So I would always pick people who represented that upbeat element, which I had also, So, and I had some teachers which I learned something, did not connect to it so well. And then I would look for someone else. And I give myself a lot of credit that I didn't give up, because I had this one guy and then I wanted to learn something else, and I'm like, well, let me look over there and let me try that out, and if that's not going to be it, then I can't quit, but let me at least find out what's over there. And then I went to Holland, and then I met someone, Emil, and said he talked about America. I'm like, well, let's go to America, let's see if I can make it happen, and at least let me try out that and see how it works out. And if it doesn't work out, I can stop and do something else. And then I was in Boston, and I was like, New York or LA. I'm like, well, let me go to, I was drawn to Los Angeles because the weather is so nice, beach, pretty women and everything, and I'm like, well, maybe I get too distracted. I was more intimidated by New York, and I said, let me go to New York first, and maybe let me see what's going on there. Maybe at least try it out, and I can always go to LA and can do something else, So I had this thing where I kind of like felt like I need to look somewhere else, and let's try it out, and that openness to trying it out and being open to the experience and being excited about it to try something new is what elevated me. And I think that's an element which, in more simpler terms, I would relate to younger people, to be encouraged and give themselves a chance to try things out and see how they turn out. But follow that internal excitement and energy and elevation, which gives you a certain idea.
Yeah. It's good advice. I should have given it to myself.
You know what? Join the club. I'm still working like that.
Hey, Christian, pleasure.
Yeah,
really
awesome.
Appreciate it. All right, let's have this be the first of many.
Okay, that sounds good. Anytime.
Yeah. Christian, thank you so much for chatting. And folks, we've got links to Christian's website and other things we talked about in the show notes. And I'm actually going to be chatting this week with Josh Skinner, who organizes the Lionel Hampton Jazz Festival. And I had such a great time at that event. I put out a YouTube video and a blog post about it, and that's over at doublebassblog.org. So if you'd like to see my experience with that event and what I was doing, you can check that out there. But boy, that was fun. And what a great guy Christian is. I am just so appreciative that we got some time. This is a busy festival, and Christian is in demand. So to give me over an hour and sit and chat about all these topics is just fantastic. And hopefully this is the first of many shows with Christian. Christian's one of those guests where I could talk to him every single day for weeks on end, and we never run out of things to talk about. So definitely a round 2 coming soon. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. However you found it, I really appreciate it. We've been doing this for over 13 years now, millions of downloads across the globe. You name the country, it's been listened to in that country at this point. It's incredible when I go into my statistics and look at that. And we've got an email list that has been growing over the years and ever faster. And if you're not on that, I'd love to have you be on that. You can visit our website, contrabassconversations.com, to join up there, and also follow us on social media and all that kind of good stuff. And if you can think of somebody that would benefit from listening to this episode, share it out, email it out, share it on Facebook, or however you like to share things. That helps the show grow. That helps it reach more people. And it's just that's the number one thing that you can do to help us here at Contrabass Conversations. And we have a whole team of people putting these episodes together. I couldn't do it without Michael Cooper and Steve Hinchy, Trevor Jones, Krista Copper, and Mitch Mooring. And Mitch makes beautiful award-winning basses in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Learn more on his website, mitchmooring.com. I'm your host, Jason Heath, and we will see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.